Hi, it's Kristen May, and for today's Fun in the Field Friday, we're going to be learning about prescribed fire in the Francis Marion National Forest. Today we're going to have a special guest that is a staff member of the Forest Service.
My name is Beery with the Francis Marion and Sumter National Forest here on the Francis Marion Ranger District. Today I'm going to be talking about the use of prescribed fire and how it helps the ecosystem, as well as kind of some of the tools that we use. So everybody thinks that, there's really only one kind of fire, and that's just simply not true. There's really three types of fires. There's controlled fires or prescribed fires. And those are exactly what it sounds like, control. We have control of it. We're lighting it, we're managing the intensity of it, we're managing what that fire does, and we're doing it under a certain prescription. So when we're burning, we take a lot of things into consideration. We have lots of meetings with our biologists, our horticulturists, timber folks. If we're lighting the fire, we have an array of guidelines that we have to follow, and everything has to line up. From the weather to the personnel to line location of where we stop it and how intense we burn it. Prescribed fire and controlled fire, pretty much the same thing, and all it means is that we're doing it under certain conditions so that it moderates the fire intensity. A wildfire, however, can be started naturally with lightning or human start. We tend to start fires with dragging chain, flipping cigarette butts out the window, campfire escapes. So those are fires that are not planned and really have no parameters. Once those wildfires start, maybe in an untreated area, maybe in a treated area, we are not planning that. We try to keep those as small as possible or stop them in the safest area possible. Controlled burning will definitely help prevent wildfire and as well as wildfire intensity. If we just let a fire go, it does its own thing. It's going to create a lot more heat. It's going to line up with the wind and do whatever it wants to do. If it runs into those areas that we've treated that, say, look like something like this behind me, it's going to slow down. There's not going to be enough fuel to keep it going at that intensity. So we really like to use these areas that we treated kind of as fire breaks, if you will, and we can then put that fire out. But if it's in an area that's untreated, it makes it a lot more difficult to get in there, stop the progression of the flames. Prescribed fire is starting to play a massive part in stopping wildfire. Historically, say if there's no human on the landscape, the ecosystem is going to do it itself in one way or the other. They have lightning, forest fires naturally start, and if there was no humans here, they would just run the landscape on their own. We're just simply helping that along. We've actually gone in many cycles with stopping fire and using fire to help the landscape. Back in the 80s, it was stop and put out every fire because we really truly didn't understand how well it was used naturally. Now we're kind of in the cycle of using fire to try to get the ecosystem back as close as we can to historical values. If we don't do it, it's going to end up looking a lot like a jungle. You're not going to be able to see through it. It's really, really thick. Some of the trees aren't healthy because they're not getting the nutrients from the ground. There's just too much competition. We treated this area in March 2020, and before that, 2018, we treated it. You can see the ground fuels are lifted. So by fuel, I mean anything that is combustible. So it could be anything from grasses, which take a second to burn, up to the trees, which take much longer to burn. But the more fuels on the ground, the more tall your flame lengths are going to be. So if you have a bunch of fuels on the ground in an area that's never been treated, that means the tree limbs are down as well, and it's just one continuous fuel bed, so the fire will raise up into the trees. You can see the ground fuels are lifted, so the canopy is a little higher. That makes it great for predators as well as prey, seeing that predator coming. What else happens is you start to get this grass understory. It starts to pop up. The area behind me is much thicker than previous area because this area has never been treated. You can see much more ground fuels and ladder fuels up to the top of the trees, and that'll allow fire to climb those trees and kill more of the leaf overstory.
Let's take a look at the treated and non-treated areas side by side. The treated area on the left has a lot of pine trees and grasses, with not many shrubs and vines that could compete and even strangle young pine trees. The non-treated area on the right is just the opposite. It's a mess. Rocky mentioned that treated areas can be better for certain types of predators and prey. This is because when an area is treated, you can see through it. A predator will be better able to locate and catch a prey in the treated area, and prey can better see predators coming. Look at how in the treated area you can easily keep an eye on Kristen May. However, in the untreated forest, Kristen May disappears quite quickly. The forest needs both types of ecosystems, but if there was no prescribed fire, the entire forest would look like a non-treated area.
Ideally, we would burn this every 2 to 3 years, just so it allows those grasses to come up. If you don't burn every 2 and 3 years, you get a bunch of forbs and shrubs that block those grasses from coming up. Those grasses are very important for those animals to survive. It brings lots of nutrients, bees out for the flowers. It brings all sorts of smaller animals that sustain this ecosystem. All animals benefit from controlled burning if you do it correctly. Correct time of year, the right temperatures, the right RH, the right winds, and then managing how often you maintain those areas. Animals around here, the Reptile Association has really been a big proponent of us burning. We have a couple areas where we've burned and they've came in and done studies and found plenty of snakes that they didn't know that were there. And then turkey is a huge one as well. There's a large culture of turkey hunting, so we burn to sustain those turkey. We burn areas that aren't the habitat turkey like, but after we go through, you will find more and more turkeys, more and more nests. They need that mix of thick and open to sustain themselves. So those are just a few of the species that we like to promote, as well as the red cockaded woodpecker. If you're driving down the road and you see some trees with some white stripes, those are trees that we have prepped. That means taking away the fuel around the bottom, because we're trying to promote those woodpeckers nesting in those trees. We can put inserts in them, or we'll see that they're naturally active and just help sustain those trees. One of them is the longleaf pine tree, and the way fire helps that is the pine tree drops its seeds. The seeds sit and could sit dormant for years on the ground or under the soil. When fire goes through there, it disturbs those seeds enough to where they sprout. And in that sprouting phase, it can sit there and it looks kind of like grass for several years. And then when we can go through and burn it again, so there's no competition, those trees sprout up and become juveniles. Once the juveniles start, they're really, really kind of dependent on fire. They don't like competition, and they really thrive in areas that have been treated with fire. It's very important to work closely with the timber industry. We have our own timber department. We also work closely with South Carolina State and do a lot of timber with them. If we don't manage that timber, it's going to be harvested wrong in most cases. It's not easy to manage timber the way we do it. You know, we like to leave certain number of tree in each area instead of clear cutting all the time. If we don't manage how timber is cut, we're not going to get the right ecosystem to sustain the wildlife or promote the tree species that we are trying to promote. Today I'll show you a drip torch. It's very simple. It's a container about a gallon of fuel, and we mix it. Put this little nozzle on here like so. And then we just walk down the road or the trail and drop little bits of fuel on the road or on the fuel bed. just to get it going. Some of the PPE we wear are Nomex pants. These pants have a special coating in the fibers that prevent them from burning. That doesn't make them fireproof, it just makes them fire resistant. Also, the Nomex shirt, same material, we just call it a yellow. We have it yellow so that you can be seen in the woods. If it were green, we'd blend in a little bit too much and wouldn't be able to see each other. In addition to that, hard hats, eye protection, ear protection, gloves. We like to wear leather gloves. You can't cut them as easy. We deal with a lot of sharp tools, chains, and leather gloves work pretty well for us. Fireline Handbook. This has a lot of guidelines on wildfire as well as fire activity. They cover a whole array of things, everything from aircraft all the way down to operating an engine or just finding an RH. We have a smaller one of these that everybody carries. It's called an IRPG, Incident Response Pocket Guide. This is a belt weather kit. We'll use these on a wildfire especially, most of the time on an hourly basis. What that does is it allows us to track those trends of the weather. The hotter it gets and the drier it gets, obviously fire is going to burn more intensely and fuels are going to be more readily available. So we track that pretty closely. If we can get an idea of what that weather is in a certain area, we can start adjusting our tactics, strategies, and ways that we handle the fire. So it comes with the sling-slide chronometer. You have your compass, which allows you to tell wind direction, and then you have a wind meter. That tells you your wind speed. And then of course your documentation, notepads, pencils, and it's important to keep those weather trends in mind when planning for a future shift. The main thing we do is we burn against the wind. So we try not to line up any fire with the wind. The more the wind has ability to get behind the fire, the faster and more intense the fire will go.
Well, I hope you learned a lot and maybe even had a little bit of fun. See you next time. Stay wild!